Whoever's listening, guys, welcome back and welcome to another episode of the Man with a Plan podcast. Earlier in an earlier past episode, I said we have a string of guests that I am so excited about, and today we're going to get to meet a couple of them. If you're a fan of this podcast, 2 years ago I did an interview with Bo Collins and his dad, and everyone just loved it. It was a blast. It was great interaction, and I had to figure out a way to replicate that again. And today we're going to do just that with Ronan Hanafin, Clemson wide receiver, and his father, Dan Hanafin. Guys, welcome to the show. How are y'all doing?
Good. Thank you for having us.
Doing great, Grayson. Thanks for having us. This is going to be a fun night. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So the thing I like to do with all of our guests, and I think we're going to get into a lot of great stories, a lot of great just memories, maybe go down a couple of lanes there, but we're going to start with Ronan, with your football career, just how you got into it. I know that Dan, in the conversations you've had, that Ronan's kind of a daredevil. So did that play it all into his start with football? Just what was that journey like for the both of you?
Dad, you go first.
Well, I remember watching, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there was a video, there was like a VHS video. You're probably too young for the VHS videos, Grayson, but back in those days of those big VHS tapes, there was a video called The Crunch Course, and it was an NFL Films video, and it highlighted guys like Lawrence Taylor and Walter Payton and things like that. And I about wore out that tape when I was young, and in younger years in high school and things like that, watching that film. But I'll never forget, Bill Parcells was quoted in there, and he talked about how when you have a puppy and the puppy bites when it's young and you can't cure them of it, and then as they get a little bit older, it continues to bite and you can't cure them of it. Chances are, when that puppy becomes a full-grown dog, it's going to bite. And that's about the story of Ronan. Ronan was that puppy that just always had that bite in him. We would do some cool things around the house with all the boys. We have 5 sons. Ronan has an older brother, Shane, that's at Boston College. He plays there. And then Ronan has 3 younger brothers, Charlie, Daniel, and Eli. But we would do cool things around the house when they were young, and we were doing some work on the house. So we had a room that was empty, and we used it as kind of a big playroom. It was basically a mat room. So we would play the game. I'm sure Ronan remembers this, the game Hurricane. So I would sit on the floor and I would hold a football or a bag or a pillow or something like that, and I'd let the boys take a run at me and hit me and kind of teach them how to tackle. And they were young at the time, maybe even 5 and 6, 4 and 5, whatever. And they would come in and tackle, and I would kind of rate them on a Hurricane scale, 1 to 5. And it was always fun. And I'd kind of goat them into trying to tackle and hit harder by giving them a low score. Oh, that was a stiff breeze. That was just a little zephyr, something like that. And it wasn't too long before Ronan was full blown Category 5 Hurricanes coming in making tackles. So that's kind of where some of that stuff started. And then when he got into football as soon as he could, at about 7 or 8 years old, he just there was just a little something different about him. He always had a little extra gear that he could kick in. He was kind of tenacious when he was coming in for tackles, things like that. So, and he always had this just little smirk on his face. The harder the hits were, the bigger the smirk was. And it didn't matter whether he was getting tackled or he was tackling somebody else. That's where it started for him, and it's never really changed. He enjoys football. He enjoys the contact. So that's it's been a lifelong story for him.
Ronan, when did you get your first 5? What was that experience like? Just like finally reach the mountaintop of the ratings.
Yeah, I can't really remember. I don't know. I probably was like 5 or 6, because we'd have like 3 bedrooms, right? So we'd have like my parents' bedroom, we call it the middle bedroom, and then our old room, which is now the guest bedroom. And we'd open all the doors, so it's just one long hallway, and we'd start all the way at my bedroom and then run to my parents' bedroom, and it'd be like one long line. We would just run and get all the speed and then hit them. So
man, you were prepared for the Oklahoma drill from the start then, weren't you?
Yeah.
Those were fun days. I wouldn't dare do that now. I'd end up in the hospital.
So Ronan, for you, is there anything you want to add to that, and how like that progressed into when you actually put the pads on? Besides telling people, watch out, I've done the mat drill at my own home. How did that journey start for you, especially growing into the sport?
Yeah. Well, I kind of always like, I think my dad would say the same thing, or he kind of tried to get me to be QB first. Me and my older brother, and then I didn't really just want to listen. I kind of just wanted to. I was either like running back or catching the ball for my older brother, who is now obviously still a quarterback at BC. So it was really cool just having that connection with him. I kind of always played up a year, so we would just be able to play with each other. So it was cool just having like from what was it, E-team, Pop Warner to high school, we were on the same team all the years, so it was cool.
And when I got a chance to take a look at your film, whenever you initially committed to Clemson, because the thing that really struck out to me, when people that told me was, oh, this kid's multiple positions, versatile athlete, a couple hard hits there on the film of just like, oh, this is that crush zone that your dad was talking about. But talk to me about that willingness to play both positions. How do you think that helped when it came to recruiting and being like, hey, I
Yeah,
can play multiple positions. I understand the game at a different level than most.
yeah. I mean, that definitely helps just being able to like, especially at wide receiver. Like I played corner my freshman year of high school, which is kind of weird looking back on. But definitely helps just being able to know what a corner's thinking and how to beat them through that. You know what I mean? So it definitely helps playing both sides of the ball, all positions you can at a young age.
Absolutely. So when we get to the recruiting side of this, and the thing that was interesting, and I looked back at the podcast with Bo and his dad, and I'm sure the answer is going to be drastically different when I talk about recruiting. And Dan, I'd love for you to start with this, just talk about from your perspective with Ronan growing up in high school as NIL and this new world of college football becomes this thing. What was this process like for both of you? We'll get to Ronan from your perspective on this process before we get to why Clemson, but how different were your expectations? Maybe a little different. Did it ever come into the conversation? If you're comfortable with answering that, like how did people pitch to you? Maybe being like, "Hey, this is where you can maximize this or that," and what was just a general reaction to that process?
Yeah, it was very different. I think when we first got into it, or with Ronan, and we had a little bit of a year lead time with his older brother Shane in a similar process, or close to it. Ronan kind of hit a little bit of a different level at some point where they started, the offers started coming kind of fast and furious. So it was, just as it is still now, surreal. This whole thing is surreal to watch your son, your kids out on the field in front of 80,000+ people is surreal. That's never going to not be surreal for me. So at the time when some of these offers were coming in, I knew as a dad, like their talent level, and particularly Ronan's, but it still is surprising. So we were lucky and very, very fortunate actually to have Mike Willie, who was Ronan's and Shane's high school football coach at Buckingham Brown and Nichols in Massachusetts, as their coach. I don't think I've ever seen or heard of anybody in a high school setting, particularly in our area, who does a better job linking in with college coaches and understanding the lay of the land like he does. And it was great to have him as an advisor through the entire process. So that really was a huge benefit to us. But seeing as this process started to unfold, that was at the same time the NIL changes were starting to come into effect. The transfer portal was starting to open up and come into effect. So I don't know if anybody really knew what to expect. We certainly didn't. The world of NIL, I played college football a million years ago, and there was no such thing. It was, not even close. So that was a completely different world for us there. And I really didn't know how to advise Ronan on that initially. So we talked and we did our research and talked to a lot of different people. But again, we kept coming back to their high school coach. And then also I was fortunate enough to know some people in the field. Football is a very small world, and over time it gets even smaller. It's amazing. The same names keep kind of coming up, and it's there's 6 degrees of separation between Kevin Bacon and everybody else, but I think there's like 2 degrees of separation between everybody in football. So those things we had the benefit of talking to some people, but the thing that we ultimately got to, and this is what I think my wife and I talked to Ronan about, is we did not want him to make a decision based on any type of monetary compensation. Like the idea of going and getting, the blessing of going and getting a free education, in a top-notch education at that, and the ability to kind of have all of the different benefits that they have already, whether it's the training facilities, the strength and conditioning program that they have, the training table and meal program that they have, books and resources to help them academically. All of those things come in, room and board, all those things come with a price, and that's a price that the school pays to have somebody like Ronan come and play for them. So that was never lost on us. And I think when it came to the NIL stuff, I eventually got to the point where my wife and I both talked about this, and we talked about it with Ronan, and I talked about it with his high school coach. We didn't want to have those conversations of NIL early on in that process, and even well into the process. We didn't want to have those conversations. We kind of actually avoided having those conversations at all, because Ronan's a very mature kid. Or young man. He's I think got his head on his shoulders, but every young man, can sometimes be swayed by a shiny thing, and we didn't want that for him. We wanted him to make a good, mature decision based on what was important in life, his faith, his family, what would be his football family, obviously the football X's and O's part of it. And very important to us were the people that were not only coaching in the program, but surrounding the program, and the people that he was going to be with for, the next at least 4 years, So that was what we thought about it in NIL initially, is we didn't want to have those conversations. We wanted it to be separate from the initial talks.
Yeah, and I think with college football, that's tough today. Sometimes be able to separate the two and how things progress. Anything you want to add to that, Ronan, with that process?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what I just said. I just don't want anything to kind of just sway my decision with something that was, like my dad said, just monetary. And if you're playing good on the field, those things will come. So I wasn't really worried about that.
Yeah. So when it comes to Clemson, we'll talk about the process and just kind of how Dabo works into it. But Ronan, I'd love to hear from you. It's interesting to be able to talk to. You're the first Massachusetts recruit since Christian Wilkins to come to Clemson. And what was the perception of Clemson? It's obviously from Boston, I guess, to Clemson. It's a completely different world. And so the national prominence that Clemson obviously has now compared to maybe when Wilkins was being recruited, what was that perception like? And what was the initial talks with Clemson, I guess? What led you and what drew you to get your attention? Because you had offers from all the big schools, Notre Dame, Alabama, LSU. We could go on and on and on. But what drew you to Clemson, and what were those initial conversations like?
Yeah, actually, thinking back to it, I didn't even really I wouldn't say not think about Clemson, but back in their early national championship, 2016, 2017, 2018, I wasn't even really thinking about that could be a really option for me. Just based on the fact that we weren't growing up as Clemson fans from the Northeast. It's not that common to see someone with Clemson gear around. So, but then, going through the recruiting process, I came to the school, I don't know if it was 2021 or 2022, one of those springs. I think it was 2 years ago that, we visited, we were doing our trips and stuff, and we rolling into town, and you see the tiger paws on the road. Is a cool place. So it was good to see all the coaches and stuff. They're obviously all great guys, and Coach Sweeney does a great job with all that stuff. So
it's something that we relayed with this podcast with Bo's father. He told me how involved Dabo was in the recruiting process and how honest he was through that process. Can you kind of, and either of you two can speak on that? We can start with you, Dan, on that. Is how involved does Dabo get into that process? And sometimes it may just come down to a position coach. Sometimes it may come down to this, speaking to one guy, but it feels like it's different when it comes to Clemson's recruiting. What were those conversations like? And can you speak to that level that Dabo, the personality that Dabo brings to the table when he tries to pitch your son at Clemson?
Oh, definitely. So, I think for me, going back to that last question that you asked Ronan, when we were watching those national championships and things, when we were watching those games, Coach Sweeney was, I think, the face of the program. You had incredible players, and that continues to roll. There's these incredible names that continue on into the NFL and all those things, all the names that we know. But at the heart of that whole thing was Coach Sweeney, and I think it's clear that he was building something that was very special, but he was also very special. And there's sometimes when an institution or a place can sort of be at the heart of it. But I think for me, for me initially, it was Coach Sweeney. Just his refreshing way of talking. He didn't pull any punches. He talked about his faith. He talked about how important family was. He talked about the building of a family and a program from Clemson. And it was through Coach Sweeney that we kind of got to know Clemson, right? So I don't know if it was initially the idea of South Carolina and Clemson as much as it was Coach Sweeney back in those early days. And I always was very, appreciative of that. And kind of, we talked through the Clemson idea back then in those early days when they were young and even early on and before they even hit high school. But then as this opportunity arose, and whoever thought it would have been a possibility, it wasn't us at the time. It wasn't kind of that thought. But as it moved forward, Coach Sweeney being at the heart of those discussions, we were initially talking with Coach Grisham, the receivers coach, and Ronan's coach now, currently Coach Grisham. And he was carrying on some of those same traits and some of the incredible, the incredible qualities that Coach Sweeney has, we were seeing in Coach Grisham and hearing in Coach Grisham, and some of those initial phone calls and things like that led, and it was almost a very similar message. And it started to, everybody that we talked to from Clemson started to develop those same type of conversations and the same type of thought process and the same type of, not talking points, but idea and philosophy. So that was what originally drew us. And I know for me, and also I think that drew Ronan in as well. And clearly the success that he had along with his ideologies is pretty incredible.
Yeah. And it feels like the honesty, the way kind of he runs the ship here can draw a certain crowd and draw certain people to the program. And it's not all about, it feels it's run a little different here, I guess.
Oh,
Is
definitely.
an easy way to say it.
Ronan,
go ahead.
You can kind of see how that's happening even today. Like, he takes a lot of heat. Coach Sweeney takes a lot of heat from different places. You can hear that on ESPN and different things. He's taken heat for doing it different, but I don't think he's ever shied away from doing it different. I think I'd probably tell you, he's not about being the same. He's about trying to do it the right way and the best way he knows how. And it's been obviously pretty good. He's done a good job. So.
Absolutely. So Ronan, one thing that really fascinates me about this whole process is that initial commitment. So I'd love to kind of go through what your mindset is that day when you made that decision. Obviously, not the same day, anything, but anyways, you make the decision to commit to Clemson. What's that process like with telling the coaching staff and then making that announcement, and then it leading to signing day? What's that mindset like, and what ultimately in your mind clicked going, okay, this is the place I want to be?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously a long process for us, and we were kind of I was trying to think of all like the possible scenarios and weighing out all like the pros and cons of every school, and obviously it came down to just like a couple of schools, and it was really tough decision for me for kind of struggling on that for a couple months. But to be honest, I just pray about it a lot, and I just hope God would just lead me in one direction. And I think when I did commit, I called, I think it was I think I just FaceTime Coach Sweeney. And honestly, I think they're kind of expecting it. They were all together with Coach Grisham and all the other coaches and stuff. And they were going crazy. It was awesome.
It's kind of like crazy. You have like a weird, maybe potential connection. If they're in like a public place, you like kind of see like a static, like they're celebrating or something like that. Was it like, it's through FaceTime. It feels so surreal to me. That's like, oh, hey, I'm committed to Clemson, by the way. And then you just
I know,
end the
yeah.
call.
It was weird. I know, it was like over the phone. I was like, oh, I just committed to Clemson. I know they're yelling, going crazy on the phone, but yeah, it was really cool.
That's awesome, man. So we talk in this podcast about the chaos of everything and how there's so many areas and layers to recruitment now. But for Ronan, for you, and I would love to hear your thoughts too, Dan. what piece of advice would you give to somebody that's in your shoes right now that is deciding where the heck do I go? What the heck is this next stage of my life going to be like? What maybe advice helped you get through it? And what would you say to someone now?
I'll go first. Yeah, honestly, like what helped me a lot is just praying about it. God's going to lead you in one direction or another, and you just got to kind of roll with it. So I think obviously he landed me at the right spot, and just weighing out all the pros and cons of every school and really figuring out what's best for, you and your family. So I think that worked for me.
Absolutely. Dan?
Yeah, I think it's easy today to get in, from my perspective, on the other end of this, on the kind of long in the tooth end, right? It's probably easy for young kids and sometimes families to get caught up in short-term stuff. I think we got some good advice along the way, and one of those pieces of advice is don't pick a program for the coaching staff, because you never know whether that coaching staff is going to be there, right? Well, I don't know if I subscribe to that theory all the time, especially given this situation here, because you meet so many great people in football, but I think you have to weigh out what the possibilities are, regardless of whether that coach stays there or not, whether they're going to be there long-term or not. And I think that Ronan did that. It took him a little bit longer to come to the decision, but one of the things that we talked about is when Ronan makes a decision, when he was to make a decision, we didn't want him to think about it as, well, I could always jump ship, but I could always go somewhere else. That's not kind of how we operate. We try to teach all the way through as they're growing up, and even still is commitment to, what you put your name to, you have a commitment to that, and you got, play it out, good times or bad, difficulties, whatever, play it all the way out and work as hard as you can. And you can control the things that you can control through hard work, through effort. And then ultimately the most important thing is prayer and trusting in God and what his role for you is. So I think we heard that message in concert at Clemson. I think, Ronan, that was very important to him. I'll give you like one quick story. When the day, like we had told him, he was really, really going back and forth over the final four schools that he had kind of boiled it down to. And they were all great programs and great schools. So we were, again, surreal that those were the remaining bottom four. And one of the things that I told him is he's a man of few words, as you can probably tell here. He kind of says it straightforward and pretty quickly, but he, I told him, I said, Ro, we don't want you to commit unless you can explain to us why. It's very important that you explain why. And, when you can explain it to us, and when you can really kind of give us a full explanation, and we understand why you're making the decision that you're making, then, we'll go and trust it, and then you can commit. And he had some advisors along the way too, some uncles and things like that were in the mix, and some friends and other, again, coaches and things. So he asked a lot of advice. He was doing a really good job of vetting it out. So one day he sat us down. I remember exactly where we were. We were out on our back patio, and he said, I've made a decision. And he said, okay, we're going to sit down. And I said, he told us that it was going to be Clemson. And I said, okay, why? And he said, I really can't give you any one single reason why. He said, but I can tell you that I know if I go to Clemson, I'm going to leave there a better man. So as a parent, my wife and I looked at each other and said, okay, there's no better answer than that. And I think it's true when you look at what those coaches have managed to do, and all of them, everybody that's there, and not only the coaching staff, but all the support people, all of the, people in Clemson. There's like, that thing, there's something in the hills. And I really, truly believe that. Like, we love going down there. We love the people of Clemson. We've I think Ronan said it in one of his things. He like, one of the quotes that he had was, he was, Clemson football or the football program brought him to Clemson. The people of Clemson kept him there. And I think that's pretty appropriate. He really fell in love with the place and the people, and, just that idea of it being a place that can grow you into a better person, I think is true.
Absolutely. And before we get into year one at Clemson for you, Ronan, I'd love to just hear a quick snippet of, because the thing that was the biggest storyline, I guess, was before your freshman year was the hiring of Garrett Riley coming to Clemson. And just for you as a recruit, how did they sort of connect you with that and say, hey, this is the direction we're going? That Riley's coming in, and then he takes an official visit to Massachusetts to come see you. And so what was that process like? And being like, oh, this big news. Oh, he's right at my front door. It felt like it happened so quickly. So what was that process like with the hiring and then him coming up to visit you?
Yeah, it was honestly really cool. We heard he was going to be the OC, and we were all getting, crazy because obviously they just went to the national championship. They had a great year. He's a great coach. Just really, I kind of feel like he's more my vibe. You know what I mean? Just kind of low key, but just gets to work. And he's, in meetings, he'll be funny and stuff. He'll be lighthearted, but when it's time to work, he'll work and stuff. So I really like that about him. And yeah, a week after he was at Clemson, he came right to my house. So that was his first visit, and it was really cool just being able to, talk with him and seeing him in on his journey. And we kind of just welcomed him with a snowball fight. So
A snowball fight. Who won the
yeah,
snowball fight? I need to hear about this.
my little brother Eli.
Oh, so what's the
Yeah,
strategy
he
there
threw one.
with
He
the
threw one down my back. So
oh,
He was
is there a
early.
successful strategy there to winning the snowball fight against your offensive coordinator?
aim for the head. The head. Yeah.
Earlier in the day, it had snowed, and we were wondering if the flight was going to land in our area. So we were kind of, it was a little bit iffy whether the weather was going to hold out enough for them to get in, but it did. The flight landed, but once Eli heard that everything was a go, he was out on the side deck, and he's making a row of snowballs along the way. So I knew something was up. I'm like, what are you doing, Eli? And he's like, oh, nothing, just getting ready, getting ready for. So he had planned it apparently earlier. So as soon as Coach Grisham, Coach Sweeney, and Coach Riley got out of their car, I think they were amazed with the snow to begin with, because they don't see it very much as it is down there. But Eli just kicked it off right from the jump, and it was an experience for everybody. I think it's pretty funny.
It's like, oh, how was your official visit? Oh, it's cool. I got domed by my offensive
Yeah.
coordinator in the
Yeah.
face by a snowball, but other than that, it was pretty good. It's good stuff. It's a good start, actually. A good building off point for a player and a coach. But Ronan, for you, year one at Clemson, it's unlike anything I've experienced. I'll say that. It was certainly a great, interesting year. You start 4-4, but you build so much momentum in the back half. You beat South Carolina and avenge that loss from 2022. You cap off wins against Notre Dame, UNC with top 3 draft pick Drake May, and you go in and win a shootout in the wackiest bowl game that I've ever seen in a long time against Kentucky. So I would love to start. I know the initial plan, Ronan, was for you to be redshirted, but what was that process like for you to be basically being told, hey, we need you to play every single game. We value you so much. We want to sort of change course and change direction. What was that initially like? And then we'll talk more about the process of the season.
Yeah. So at first I didn't like. This was, I think, a couple games in. Honestly, the first game I didn't go to Duke, and I was like really pissed, and I was like, I'm gonna do whatever it takes so I can get on the field. So I kind of just worked my butt off in practice and try to do whatever I could, like on special teams or scout team, whatever it was, to just get out in the field however I can. You know what I mean? So I think a couple weeks went by, and I think they were starting to notice it. So they put me up with like against the starters and stuff, and I think I was doing pretty well. So I got that call. I think it was like right after one of my classes, and they said they're gonna take my red shirt off, and I'm gonna be playing primarily special teams for the whole year, and just be ready at receiver. So that's what I did, and I was just studying playbook like crazy, so I could be whenever they needed me.
And so, Dan, when you hear that Ronan's going to be one of those gunners on kickoff team, do you get any memories back of better tell him to get the consistent 5s in the hurricane category?
I knew he would. I knew he would come to play, no doubt. Again, he's kind of he's not a big rah-rah guy. He's pretty quiet. He's intense, and you can see it in his face when he gets that way. So I knew we hadn't anticipated going to many games because again, we thought he was going to redshirt. So we thought maybe we'd get down to 1 or 2 games through the year, but we ended up, we'd leave Friday night, drive through the night to get down to games and things. As soon as that happened,
We drove.
And we had
18-hour drive.
Oh my gosh.
So we put a lot of miles and a lot of hours in the car, and we flew down to, and we had a lot of family. We have a huge family. I'm the youngest of 11 kids.
Wow.
And my wife has 2 siblings as well. So we have family in Pennsylvania and mainly in Massachusetts in this area. But there are so many of his cousins and aunts and uncles and things that there was, tons of people almost at every game. So we would travel down, and he didn't disappoint. He was, I think the kind of the changes in kickoff and things. I think he was waiting for that ball to land short of the goal line a few times on kickoff as he's running down, and then just overall we were thrilled to see him out there. It's something surreal to see your son on that stage, and kind of recognizing and realizing all the work and time and effort that he put in along the way is come to this. And I'm a huge college football fan. I know up in our area, pro sports kind of rule the day up here with the Patriots and and all those things, but I'm a huge college football fan. I always have been. So seeing that stage and seeing the teams that they're playing, and I used to bleed green, in my life with Notre Dame, being an Irish Catholic guy from Boston, and seeing him out on the field playing against Notre Dame in that setting was crazy. And one of his best friends is playing on the other side of the ball from him, and just those things were incredible. So I whether it's special teams or offense, whatever it is, it was something to be seen. My wife and I just kept looking at each other, just smiling and shaking our heads the whole time. So.
Absolutely. So Ronan, I'd love to hear, and then Dan, I'd love to get your thoughts as well. Just describe the first home game for me. I think we talked to Bo and his dad about it. They described it as a surreal experience, just because they're from California. It's similar to you, not very familiar with the local area, I guess, and how game days operate on Saturday. So take me through that first run down the hill, that first home football game. It's always really, regardless of what's going on, it's just a fun environment to be a part of. 80,000 people screaming their heads off. Ronan, what was that experience like as a player? Their nerves, or is it more like, oh, this is getting me amped up?
Yeah. So, coming from Massachusetts, like, hockey kind of rules up there. So it was kind of weird just seeing that many people. I was used to playing in front of maybe a couple hundred and at most like 1,500 people. So going from that to 80,000 run down the hill, it was pretty cool. And when you get out there, and actually one of the things I'd said to myself now that I was like on special teams, I said that every single game I'm gonna knock someone on the bed. And I did that. So that was part of it.
There you go. We'll ask you about a memorable play in a quick bit here when we do some rapid fire. But Dan, talk to me about that experience as a parent, and just Bo's dad got to talk to us about sitting with the other parents and kind of having that camaraderie there. What was that experience like for the first time to really take everything in?
Again, I think, if Bo's dad said surreal, I'd say the same thing, because that's kind of the only way to describe it. Is it's almost, I'm not going to go as far to say it's an out of body experience, but it feels so crazy to be in that setting, and you look around and you're seeing all the tailgating going on. You're seeing these, tens of thousands of people, so excited, and the orange is overpowering, those days. And they just finished the new Tiger Walk area, which it was incredible. The pregame, all the little details and all the little traditions that go into pregame at Clemson make it unique. I remember vividly watching and hearing about the most exciting 25 seconds in sports being that cannon going off and the team running down the hill. It truly was, for watching it from the perspective of a parent sitting in the side, in the stands, watching that hill and knowing that sun's running down is just bananas. There's really no other way to describe it. It's crazy. So we loved every second of it. And it was only, in some of those moments, we keep saying it over and over again. My wife and I, like, this is the perfect place for him. It is the perfect place. And almost, that happens. That's not just one time or 3 times or 5 times. It's just over and over again. It is the perfect place. And when you have moments like that, you see how happy he is coming down, and you see him, jumping and doing crazy stunts off of the ramp at the, coming down the hill.
Yeah.
You just know how how amazing it is, and what an experience it is, and how few people get to have that experience. So I'm so proud of him, and so proud as a parent to have him in that mix, as I am of all of our kids. Our older son Shane's up at Boston College, and that's the same thing. It's a crazy experience to have your sons reach, that level of success in something at such a young age, and how hard they have to work in order to get there. That's the coolest thing, is seeing the realization of their hard work.
Yeah. And you talked about crazy stunts, and I got to ask you, Ronan, about the picture of you doing the Spider-Man pose on the hill. Was that something that you did before and you were like, I have to do this for the hill? What was the inspiration for that? Because I've always worried for the players running down the hill and the coaches is like one false step and it feels like a disaster waiting for it, because Dabo runs down there like he's been shot out of a cannon. I'm like, someone's going to fall on their face. I'm surprised no one's done it yet. Do y'all train beforehand? Is there like a practice where y'all just go run down the hill and practice, be like, this is how to do it? And then they see you jumping like Spider-Man and everyone's like, Ronan, you're breaking protocol here.
Yeah, so I kind of like, you've seen it on TV, and it's like, oh, it's a nice little, it's steep. Like, I'll be the first to tell you, it's pretty steep. So we go out there, and the first time I was on the hill, I think, was one of our picture days. We were taking our like team pictures and stuff at the Rock, with Coach Sweeney. And then after that, you just like, just jog down the hill back to the bus. And it was like, I was like, Jesus, it's pretty steep, but I'm gonna try something. So, a couple of kids, like, they were just calling me, whatever names. I think my first nickname was like Bolt, and then it, like, kind of just switched to like Captain America or Spider-Man or something. So I was like, I could work with Spider-Man. So, Captain America was always my favorite superhero, but I don't know what really move I could do for him. But Spider-Man is like the easy, like, that thing. So I just kind of tried to work with that, and yeah.
Is that going to be the signature go-to every home game now? Or are you going to try to mix it up next year? Maybe a different
I'll probably try to
superhero?
mix it up. By senior year, the goal is to do a front flip. So
Oh my goodness. You heard it here first, guys. Senior year, Ronan
I don't know.
Hanafin's going to do a front flip.
Hold on a second here. I don't know if that's a good idea.
I
But
think so. I think more than just you, Dan, are going to have a problem with that. And that's probably on the staff. But
yeah.
that's not for me to decide. I'm just here to be the middleman.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Your mom, as you know,
Yeah.
kind of had a big part in. I think the first couple of times he came down, he took a little bit of a jump off of the ramp, and then his that picture, kind of, your mom has this picture. We actually have it hanging in the house. That first picture that she took of him coming down the hill in his jump. So then it just became a thing where she said the next time she's going to see if he did the same thing, and he ended up doing some other kind of crazy jump. So it became every home game there was a picture of him coming down the hill crazy. So that probably was some of the inspiration too, seeing those pictures.
Yeah, I'll be graduated from Clemson in May, Ronan. So the game that you do the front flip, let me know so I can be there for it. I need to make sure that I'm there so I can see this come to reality. This is something else.
Perfect.
So we're gonna get one more question, then we're gonna get to some rapid fire stuff and talk some Boston sports. I know someone in my comment section is gonna be rolling their eyes about that. But so Ronan, this season we talked about how it was a roller coaster. It wasn't really how the start certainly wasn't how we all wanted. But I'd love to hear about the week leading up to Notre Dame. Certainly, and we don't have to talk about why. There was a lot of buzz surrounding the attitude of the team heading into that Saturday against Notre Dame, and that propelled the buy all the stock you freaking can buy from Dabo, and then y'all go on a 5-game win streak, close the season out very strong. But what was that week like? What was it? Just all business in the building? Take us through that inside as much as you can share, I guess.
Yeah, Coach Sweeney always says, like, we don't play to like a record, or we don't play to like whatever. We play to our opponent. We play to a standard. You know what I mean? Um, so whatever the standard is, like, we'll play to that standard. So just going to Notre Dame, we're just kind of treated like any other week. But you to walk around, you see some people are a little bit more serious just because they wanted their revenge from last year. Obviously didn't leave a good taste in people's mouths. I wasn't on the team, but you can just tell it was a little bit more intense that year. And just being from Irish Catholic, it was kind of a personal game for me too. My best friend's on that team, and it was just, I know it was a little bit different, but it was cool to be able to get out there and get the win.
Absolutely. So Dan, was there maybe like phone call you had in that week, or was there something that were you just like, man, this is, because I'm sure from the outside you're seeing the thing that happened on Monday. We're not going to name what it was. Just the buzz of that week. I've never heard so much noise surrounding the program than I did in that specific week. And I was in the press box first, and I see Dabo walk out onto the hill, and usually he's pretty fired up. He's getting people pumped up. Stone cold silence. It took me by surprise. I thought, okay, this is going to be something here today. What was that week like for you? Just being like, hey, is there anything I can say maybe to Ronan to kind of get things going and get things rolling?
Yeah, I think it was a unique week. I think it was the intensity was there, and I think there's a bit of a rivalry that had been obviously kind of created over time. That's been one that you can mark on the calendar over the last few years, where there's been a difficult, I think especially how things went the year before. I know that Coach Sweeney, you could tell Coach Sweeney and the rest of the coaches were locked in, and we're seeing it from a little bit of a distance. But that day, that morning, as you're kind of rolling into the field that day, you could just see and feel that there was an energy there to that game that was even more so. I mean, I think it's the best atmosphere in college football is Clemson. And I think that day was just electric. It was just something else. I'm so glad we were there to witness it, regardless of whether it was Ronan that was there or not. It would have been an amazing thing, but to have your son part of that, I think it was just amazing. But I can't really think about any specific thing, but just seeing those seeing the uniforms out on the field and seeing him and kind of him turning and at one point, like a couple times throughout the year, he just might have been an opportunity to kind of just glance across the crowd and see and catch us. And I think during that game we caught eyes at one point, and it was pretty cool. I remember that being something that I'll never forget, is just kind of catching his eyes. And I don't know if he saw me, but I felt like he did. And him and my wife, the same thing. And we had probably 20, I think we had 25 people at the game.
Like 30 people there that game.
30 people or something from the family at the game. So that was extra special as well, having that many people there.
Now, did you drive from Massachusetts to Clemson for that game, or was that a flight?
That was one that we had picked out earlier on.
Okay.
So we actually flew down for that game. We had, and we knew that we'd have a big contingent coming down for it as well. So we had rented out a house on the lake for the whole family and things. It was pretty cool. So we knew that was coming a while. We had marked that one early.
Absolutely. So we're gonna get to some rapid fire, and I'll direct either one to two of you if it's a two-person question, but we're going to get started right here. So, excuse me, Ronan, ask you the best play you can remember from this year to your best of your memory. Maybe it was like someone was talking trash and you got like a one-up on them. You got the last laugh there, or it was just a memorable, like, oh, I got to tackle this player, I guess.
So I think I have my favorite play, or not, maybe, but one of my favorite plays was, or it was kind of just funny, I guess. As a receiver, I didn't think my first catch would be on special teams. But it was, I think it was the Georgia Tech game. We were in the purple unis, and my first catch was on an onside kick. So that was pretty cool. Most memorable was probably one of the tackles I had on special teams where I broke my thumb. So, that one kind of stuck with me a little bit, I guess.
Anything for you, Dan, that sticks out, that where you just like,
Yeah,
can't forget about it?
That same play, he came down and made a great play on a punt. Made the tackle against North Carolina in that game, and I think it's the same play that he broke his hand. I didn't know at the time that he had broken his thumb, but it just was a great play for me. I think the thing that stood out most this year for me was I think during the Notre Dame game, you get some stats after the fact, team wise, and he had was pretty cool. He had the fastest miles per hour, one of the fastest mile per hour in the country that week. But particularly on the field, that whole game between Notre Dame and Clemson, he was the fastest player on the field. And seeing that stat was like, wow, you know, I knew he was fast, but that kind of really stood out. That was a pretty cool thing. I think it was on one of the punt coverages. He had reached a speed of like 21.7 miles an hour or something like that, which is pretty. That's full tilt. So I was very proud of him. That was
on the first kickoff. They said.
Oh, was it?
Okay. Yeah, I was amped up.
Yeah. He was moving. So that was pretty cool to see as a dad. Like he's, you know, that was I saw that stat up against some other things from around the country, and you know, NFL stats and college stats, and that one, his miles per hour, I think, was up there with the top 2 or 3 in the country that week, you know, regardless of whether it's pro or college football. So he was moving. I was proud of that.
Good stuff. So with y'all being from the Massachusetts area, and you guys have seen the hats in the background, my podcast audience watching, I have to ask, is there a Boston sports event that you've been to in recent memory that's pretty memorable? Is it a championship game? Is it a parade? Just, I guess we'll start with you, Ronan. Is there a specific memory that comes to mind for any of those teams? I don't have a Bruins hat, but I should.
Yeah, a lot of them. I mean, we went to a bunch of them, you know, growing up. You know, we went to Red Sox, Bruins, Pats, obviously, and it was just Celtics, like really cool to just, you know, being in the title town. So actually most recent was Bill Belichick's last game at Gillette. So that was really cool. And we actually started a snowball fight. We were on like one of the upper decks, and we started a snowball fight with the lower deck. So that was fun. But I think that was one of the weeks over break. So I went with my brothers and a couple of my buddies. So it was really fun.
Was there a consensus in the stadium of which section won? Did your section come out on top?
Yeah, we won. Yeah, for sure.
Did the high ground. So for me, if you're asking the same question for me, I would say, you know, being a lifelong Bostonian, I don't think there's many things that could beat that 2004 World Series win, that championship. That was crazy for the Red Sox, like being on the dry spell that they were on for so long, having the Red Sox win. But we've been blessed with pro sports up here. I don't know if there's another. I really don't know if there's another town or city in America that could boast the level of sports that we've had over the years. I think we might be in for a little bit of a dry spell now, but we're doing pretty well. Yeah. So, but actually, interestingly, again, going back to the college sports thing, tonight is the Bean Pot, and I know, being a Boston sports fan, you know the Bean Pot with the hockey champion between BU and BC, Harvard and Northeastern, all playing down in that tournament. So BU, the last time I checked earlier, right before we got on, BU was up 2-1 in the Bean Pot. So good stuff there.
Good stuff. You talk about the dry spell, though. You're not going to talk about the Celtics, man. Best record in the NBA.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So actually, as a kid, that was probably one of my biggest memories as a kid, being really young, was the '86 Celtics championship. My dad, they won, and then my dad brought me in, worked in Boston, and he brought me into the parade in there in Boston. That was one of my favorite memories as a kid, was the Celtics win. So
there we go. Had to find a way to fit it in there, and especially with the Boston connection. Ronan, so for you, is there a player, or maybe just like a certain style that you model your game after?
Yeah, receiver-wise, I think, I don't know, I was kind of like Julio Jones, just because, lengthiness and just going after the ball. But my favorite, probably, I have to say Jerry Rice. My dad gave me his plaque of him in his room. It's like a huge poster board, so we have that hanging on my wall. It says, like the Nike, like, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
It has him like just did it with his like hands up in the end zone. It's cool. Pretty sick.
That's cool.
And when I have his like highlights and stuff always pulled up, and watching him just, he was a great route runner and receiver, obviously. So probably Jerry Rice, and nowadays like Cooper Cup and Justin Jefferson are cool to watch. So yeah, those guys.
So besides the front flips, Ronan, can you teach me to do a front flip and a back flip? Because I'm in desperate need of it. There's a pretty embarrassing video of me freshman year of high school just whiffing one. I need someone to teach me.
I've been actually working on I don't know what they're called, like a round off back handspring or something, where it's like
Yeah.
the cartwheel into the back flip. So I've been trying to work on that, but that's the next step.
Okay. Well, I think as long
I
as
think
it's approved, we got to
yeah,
see it down the
right.
hill.
Yeah,
Stop those.
go to the gymnast for that one.
Yeah, right.
Might have to. So, Ronan, final question for the show. Clemson gets back to the ACC title and to the college football playoff. Why?
Um, Honestly, I think it's just because I think we're one of the tightest groups in America. Um, we have a good group of guys that are just determined to win at whatever cost it takes. We've had our good off-season workouts so far, leading into mat drills. So we'll have a lot of leaders emerging on the team. That's pretty cool to see. And yeah, I think we just have a really tight group, and I think that if we can keep just pushing each other to get to that next level, that we can be really great.
Awesome. Well, guys, you have anything to add before we wrap up?
Grayson, I just want to thank you for having us on. This was awesome. I always appreciate the opportunity to have. This is probably the longest phone call I've had with Ronan since he's been at school. He's a man of few words, but you kept him on for however long we've been on now, an hour. This is awesome. So this is great opportunity for us to kind of talk. I appreciate you having us both on. It's awesome. So we're couldn't be happier with the situation, and thank you for this opportunity.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So, guys, that was episode 154 of the Man with a Plan podcast with Ronan and Dan Hanafin. Guys, I told you we had a bunch of great guests, and it starts with these two right here. Super pumped about what's to come. Hopefully, we'll have another Clemson athlete on for Friday's episode, and be tuned for a sibling podcast in the future. Guys, as always, subscribe if you enjoy what you're listening to. Leave a comment. What was your favorite part about the interview with Ronan and Dan Hanafin? Just let me know. Find me on Twitter, and I'll put Ronan's Twitter in the description, so you go follow and let you know that I sent you. Guys, thank you as always for listening. Have a great day and take care.